2024's latest horror film, The Bagman Thriller, is coming, crafted by the Worry Smile team, adapted from a folk horror legend. In just a few days, it became the box office champion for horror films in North America. Its level of horror is simply terrifying. Hurry and watch it with your gullible friends. Rumor has it that in a strange cave in the forest, there hides an incredibly terrifying monster. It has a hunched figure and a hideous face. It specifically targets children, and every child it captures will meet a terribly tragic fate. But there are always a few who are skeptical and fearless, who want to see if this is true or not. They arrived at that strange cave, in search of the rumored Bagman. Unexpectedly, just as they turned around, a large tree behind them suddenly crashed down. Seeing this, Pat was not scared at all. Instead, he foolishly walked over. Even though his friend tried desperately to dissuade him, he didn't listen at all. And just after Pat walked over, in the pitch-black cave, suddenly, a strange sound came from within. But even so, Pat didn't care at all. He continued to clear branches to make a path for his friend. But at that moment, Pat was so startled by the scene that he didn't know what to do. But the Bagman didn't want his life. Instead, he only took his hat. In the blink of an eye, decades passed. Pat became a husband and had a child, and he had long forgotten the terrifying experience of his childhood. The family lived very happily. But on this night, Pat was tidying up. The light at the door suddenly flickered. A strange noise also came from behind him. He was a bit curious about what was happening in the middle of the night. Could it be that some guy was coming over at this hour? So he took a flashlight and went to check it out. Little did he know, he searched the woods for half a day. Not only did he not find a single person, but he also discovered a terrifying mutated rat. Damn it. Pat was so scared that he ran away. He didn't stop until he ran back to the backyard. Only then did he finally breathe a sigh of relief. He thought that after tonight, the strange occurrences would not happen again. Little did he know, this was just the beginning. The next day, Parker went out to work. His wife was at home scrolling through Weibo. Their son was playing alone in the yard. But just as he was swinging, he suddenly saw a child walking out not far away. The child first waved at Jack, then turned and walked into the woods. Seeing this, Jack didn't think twice and chased after him. As he went deeper, he soon saw the boy again. But he had no idea that the boy in front of him was disguised by the burlap man. Fortunately, his mother came looking for him in time. Jack narrowly escaped a disaster. However, even though the son is safe, she always feels something is off. You say there isn't a soul in this forest. How could the child possibly go there? For this reason, she told her husband about what happened during the day. She told him everything. Listening to his wife's account, Pat felt a strong sense of unease rise within him. He recalled the events of last night. Then he thought about his son who almost got lost. The childhood fear of the Bagman also surged to the forefront of his mind. It flooded back to him. At this moment, he couldn't help but doubt that the Bagman had set his sights on his son. Just as Pat was feeling anxious, he suddenly heard his son's voice coming from next door. He was curious about who his son was talking to, so he went over to check. But there was clearly no one in the room. Yet his son was still talking to himself outside the window. So Pat opened the window again. Everyone was welcomed. Everyone was welcomed. At this point, Pat finally knew there was a 9 out of 10 chance that someone had entered the house. So he first searched around the room. Then he closed the window again. Unexpectedly, at that moment, strange noises came from outside the window again. Even his wife, who was sound asleep, was awakened by her husband's unusual reaction. Upon learning that someone was in the house, the wife immediately picked up their son. Pat also took a stick and went outside to investigate. But he searched for a long time. Yet there wasn't a single shadow to be found. Instead, that strange sound kept echoing in his ears. At this point, the couple was completely terrified. Such an exciting plot. The fragrant pig must be shared with his girlfriend to watch together. What, you don't have a girlfriend? Then why not quickly use Momo to experience the joy of girls chasing boys? It can automatically match nearby girls in 0.3 seconds. They are all real people, very reliable. You can also share your daily life. Find friends with similar hobbies. Finding a partner is so easy. They immediately reported to the police the next morning. However, the police searched the forest thoroughly, yet they could not find any useful clues. Helpless, the couple had to admit defeat. They fell asleep peacefully holding their child. But due to the strange incident that happened during the day, Pat couldn't sleep at all, tossing and turning. For this reason, he specifically went downstairs. He activated the home security system. However, in the blink of an eye, he saw the warehouse outside the door again. It seemed to have been opened by someone. Pat walked over to check, puzzled. To his surprise, he found inside a strange doll, and the hat the doll was wearing was exactly the one he lost in a cave when he was a child, taken by the Bagman. Now Pat understood everything. It turned out that everything he experienced last night, it was entirely the work of the Bagman. Thinking of this, he immediately returned to the room. But he found that the front door had been locked from the inside. No matter how he tried, he couldn't open it. So Pat went to another door, but it was locked as well. With no other choice, he had to crawl through a hole under the door. He attempted to unlock it. Unexpectedly, in a moment of distraction, he discovered that the Bagman had already appeared inside the room. Pat Pat smashed the door glass with a punch. He hurried inside the room. But at that very moment, the bagman suddenly vanished again. Suspecting that the other party might be targeting his wife, he quickly ran upstairs. But his wife and child were fine. Instead, the bagman was nowhere to be seen. Although he searched the entire room, he still couldn't find that terrifying presence. But his wife saw him not sleeping in the middle of the night, and anxiously searching for something in the room. She immediately thought he had gone mad. Unexpectedly, the next morning, strange things also happened to her. While Jack was playing, he suddenly brought a gift to his mother. The woman opened it and took a look. To her horror, she discovered that it was actually two strange paintings. One of them depicted a scene of Pat as a child in a cave, and the other painting was of herself at that moment. It looked like a perspective from inside a pipe. The more the woman looked, the stranger it seemed. So she hurried to the pipe in front of her. "Stay away from him. Stay away from my son, Jack. Jack, come here. Come here, Jack." "What?" Pat was startled awake from the dream. Only then did he finally breathe a sigh of relief. But even though it was a dream, he felt it was incredibly real, as if that terrifying Sackman had always been lurking by his side. So the next morning, the couple went to see a shaman, inquire about what to do in this situation. But the fortune teller, after hearing this, regretfully told the two of them that the bagman is a monster that specifically catches children, and every child targeted by him ultimately cannot escape. The only way now is to quickly move away from their current residence. There might still be a glimmer of hope. After hearing this, the two of them said nothing further, and immediately sent their son to their friend, Sister Kong. Then they went to look for a house. They thought that this way, they could escape disaster. But the insane bagman would not let up on his terrifying hunt just because they moved. He would continue his shocking predation on his prey. Sure enough, as soon as Sister Kong returned home, she heard strange noises coming from the monitor. Suspecting that Jack might be in danger, she immediately went to check. But just as she arrived in the hallway, the lights above suddenly flickered repeatedly, and then plunged into darkness. In her panic, Sister Kong, a loud knocking sound suddenly echoed. The anti-theft lock on the door was also slowly pulled. Seeing this situation, Sister Kong immediately realized that the bagman had come to her home. But faced with such a situation, she had no way to deal with it at all. If it were in Pat's apartment, she could still run away. But now it was a high-rise building. She couldn't possibly jump down from here, could she? In a desperate situation, Sister Kong first grabbed a knife casually, and then hurriedly picked up Jack. Taking advantage of the bagman's attack, she quickly hid in the wardrobe. By the time Pat and his wife arrived, the downstairs was already surrounded by police. Half of Sister Kong's face had also been cut deeply. Fortunately, she was discovered in time by the security guard. Otherwise, the bagman would have taken Jack away. And it was precisely because of this incident that Sister Kong had been scared into a psychological shadow. The couple had no choice but to bring her home. At the same time, to protect Jack, the police also dispatched a guard. But just as Pat was watching his son through the surveillance camera, the bagman suddenly appeared in the room again. Then the room fell into darkness. Seeing this, Pat hurried to his son's room. As soon as he arrived there, he found the guard dead on the spot, frothing at the mouth. Seeing such a terrifying scene, Pat was just about to go downstairs to check. Unexpectedly, he saw the bagman holding a bag. From inside came his son's heart-wrenching screams. Seeing this situation, Pat immediately used all his strength. He kept chasing the bagman in front of him, but after a fierce chase, he actually followed the other person. He arrived at the eerie cave from his childhood. "Dad, help me. Jack." Pat arrived at the cave, groping cautiously, then searching around based on his son's cries for help. He finally found a hole, and here were placed the belongings of the children who had gone missing over the years. Besides this, Pat also found in a certain cave a strange cloth bag. He thought his son was inside, so he trembled as he pulled the zipper. But when he opened the bag, he found that his son was not inside at all. "Dad. Dad. Dad, help me." It was only then that Pat finally understood. He had fallen into the trap of the bagman. His son had not been taken at all. The earlier cries for help had only come from this doll. And the reason the bagman did this was entirely to kill Pat. At first, he cut off Pat's hat and got his hair. Thus, the two had become enemies. With this strand of hair, even though they are thousands of miles apart, the bagman can accurately locate Pat's position. Yet he could kill Pat at any time. So why has he waited until now? It turns out that when little Pat went to the cave, it was unknowingly discovered by his father. The father knew he was being targeted by the bagman. He then gave him a flying knife stained with the water of God. handed it to his son. As long as the flying knife is not destroyed, Pat will be safe forever. But later, due to worries at work, Pat accidentally broke the flying knife. This finally gave the bagman an opportunity. When Pat was not paying attention, he suddenly attacked from behind, using anesthetic to cover Pat's mouth, then easily pulled him up, and directly threw him out. While Pat was in pain, the bagman also slowly crawled out from the gap. Then the bagman directly opened the bag, planning to dismember Pat into pieces. Fortunately, in a critical moment, Pat used all his strength. He managed to find the knife, and stabbed it directly into the bagman's neck. After repelling the bagman, Pat exerted all his effort to move his body. Struggling with his numb body, he slowly moved away. But the exit was just a few steps away. Unexpectedly, the next second, the bagman came back once again, and grabbed him with one hand. Seeing this, Pat fought desperately. But in the struggle, he ended up knocking off the bagman's hat. He appeared pale, with his skull exposed. With just a little force, he brutally yanked Pat up, and stuffed him into the bag, accompanied by the continuous cracking of bones. A heart-wrenching scream instantly erupted. Pat had completely become prey in the bagman's hands. Afterward, the wife came with the police to search, but everyone searched around. Yet they only found the flute that Pat had left behind. He originally intended to use this flute to leave a clue for his wife. If he couldn't escape, they would know who the murderer was. And the wife, who witnessed all this, immediately understood that her husband had been killed by the bagman. Even if she was deeply saddened, she could only live silently with her son. But on a later day, this flute unexpectedly appeared in her son's hands, and this meant that the bagman had not let them off the hook. Alright, that's the story for today. I am Shang Zhu. See you next time.